على بركة الله. تفضل فيصل، بدأنا.
السلام عليكم. Didn't see that. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everybody. My name is Faisal Abdurgham. I'm a senior project analyst at STC. STC, in addition to being the main telecom company, is also the digital enabler of our Vision 2030. Today, the topic will be the impact of capital projects execution. We will be focusing more about what we have learned and what things have changed during this pandemic, and how is this going to affect our future project delivery system. Just before we go ahead and get started, and a little bit of housekeeping, if you guys have any questions during the presentation, make sure you put them in the question box, and we will have some time at the end to bring up your questions and inshallah answer them by our speakers. Today we have 3 speakers from Saudi Aramco, very interesting speakers, and myself excited to be with you guys, and I'm sure everybody will learn a lot from this. Our first guest will be Mr. Abdul Qadir. Abdul Qadir is a division head in Saudi Aramco. He has 25 experience dedicated to project design, leading independent project value assurance team for complex and multidisciplinary projects with a background of mechanical engineering, in addition to his operation and maintenance experience. And then our second speaker is Mr. Karan. Karan is also working at Saudi Aramco. He's a lead cost engineer. Mr. Karan is an economist by undergraduate, and has several master's degree. One of them is Sustainable Economic Development from Erasmus University, Canada. And also a master's degree in analytics from Scottish Business School, Toronto. And the third master also risk management and business performance from York University, Toronto, in addition to some professional certifications. He has also 25 years of experience in energy industry, executing world-scale capital project for many leading companies such as SABIC, Saudi Aramco, and Adonic. Adonic stands for Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Last but not least, definitely our speaker is Mr. Falih, is a senior project at Saudi Aramco. He has 25 years of dedicated experience to planning and executing diverse type and size of capital projects, with expanding project management and engineering roles, starting from development of project design and facilities, master plan, all the way to rolling out a wide initiative to transform Saudi Aramco capital management system. Currently, he's leading engineering and execution of projects under mega unconventional gas development. As you can tell, everybody has, all of them have very interesting and exciting profiles. Now we will start with Mr. Karan. Mr. Karan, thank you for joining us and your team. Please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Faisal. Thank you for the very elaborate introduction and a very precise introduction. We are indebted to you for this introduction of myself and my team. Great. It is an honor and pride deemed upon us to bring this work to PMI, and we are very glad to have this opportunity being a part of this valued global community of project management practitioners. Before we kickstart, we'd like to express our gratitude to PMI KSA local chapter. That is where the soul of the project management practice is in the region. We'd like to also thank and acknowledge those project management stakeholders and consultants, market data providers, and research organizations whose data we have gleaned and collated in this study. To name a few, that has been Meet Projects, IHS, and IPA, and Accenture, and Deloitte, and several other white papers of consultants. After the presentation, to benefit the audience, we will be having a dedicated Q&A session for about 15 minutes, where the team will take on questions from the audience. We'd also request the audience to feel free to liaise with us and communicate to us, and we will be providing our contact email IDs after the presentation. Now, allow me to introduce the topic again next to what Faisal did already. This technical paper evaluates reactions of various project organizations to COVID-19 and major execution challenges they faced. It is focused on the outlook of what might be gained and learned now for lasting enhancements and changes for the future project industry's delivery system post-COVID-19 pandemic. I will request you to spend some time on this slide over here. Let's spend a small fraction of our time on reading this slide. We call this the momentum slide. 2020 has been an unprecedented year and a year of upheaval. This slide addresses two questions that provide impetus to the rest of the presentation. The two questions are, when you're caught on the hop by a crisis, you got two choices to make. One, you let the crisis develop and transform you. Two, you let the crisis destroy and remove you. Some thinkers who study disasters focus more on all that might go wrong, and others, us or included, are more optimistic, framing crisis not just in terms of what is lost, but also what might be learned and gained for the future. With this premise explained in the previous slide and setting the momentum, we set out to bring a brief of our research outline that addresses key changes and challenges in our project execution landscape. As you could infer from the slide, the research addresses three questions. What is the impact on capital project execution due to COVID-19? What are the interventions and relief measures adopted by project organizations? And as the pandemic puts tremendous pressure on existing projects' industry delivery system, through those cracks that are opening up, are we seeing new possibilities for a better and more efficient, resilient, and agile project industry delivery system? Is there a new normal in the project delivery system? What we did was an applied thematic and comprehensive research coverage for the project's industry delivery systems across multiple domains. As you can see and infer from the slide, the domains are society, which constitutes macroeconomics, markets, and society, and two, industry, and three, the portfolio, and four, the project management organization, and five, the project management teams. And answering the previous slide questions at each of the domain level, we delve further into the presentation. Under the first domain, society, a top-down approach into the primary impact is triggered by the macroeconomic shocks that was predominantly dominated by, one, a sudden drop in oil demand and consequently into oil and gas prices, and two, a rise in non-budgeted costs. And on the intervention dimension, there was a production cut and the sudden rise in VAT, the value-added tax. These collectively thrust us into a world of uncertainty with the pandemic appending many social indices and economic indices. There was an urgent need for the project management community to respond based on priorities. Moving on in the subject, under the second domain of industry, let us know who are the major stakeholders impacted in the industry. Firstly, we have the engineering contractors, or the major stakeholders in the industry. And secondly, we had the original equipment manufacturers, or OEMs as they're known. And third, the EPC companies, in addition to the project owner organization. In the following slides, we will dive into each of these three industry subdomains. Firstly, we will be looking at the engineering contractors. In this industry domain, and getting further closer into the challenges that are faced by engineering contractors, the impacts which are including, but not limited to, there was a sharp drop in projects workload, and the engineering value centers were more impacted than the engineering headquarters. Projects that remain active, there were 7% project engineering delays during the first few months of COVID-19, above the historical delays in engineering. Staff mobility, staff remobilization, travel insurance and logistics, flight availability, immigration health screening requirements, working from home, IT infrastructure mobility, IT connectivity at home, prioritizing workflows, communication with project clients, staff health risks, uncertainty in contracts, hierarchical decision-making, constraints between site offices and engineering headquarters, and the engineering value centers. So what were the intervention measures that we observed from the research? Working from home was apparent. There was an exodus from the office to working from home. Now, a question that arose in the mind of the participants, among the stakeholders were, will this working from home be a permanent feature, prompting a change in culture? And technology mediation was playing a major role. Change in infrastructure, change in workflow priorities. It was realized through a survey that around 80% of front-end engineering design could be accomplished through remote working, including working from home. In the detail engineering segment, around 68% of detail engineering could be accomplished by remote work. With this, let's move on to the next, with impact on equipment manufacturers. We're looking at the material suppliers here, both local suppliers and international suppliers. The upshot of this research includes extensive interviews with original equipment manufacturers, both local and international. Still in the industry domain, the material suppliers are facing significant challenges owing to lockdowns, raw material inventory, increased lead times, infrastructure bottlenecks, and staffing issues. Sharp drop in large greenfield and oil and gas projects moving into construction. Projects that remain active experienced an average pushback of 120 days in purchase order execution. This was a salient finding. And believe me, these 120 days of average pushback and lead times was only order processing. It does not include shipping and distribution and delivery. So you can understand the magnitude of this impact. And apparently, logistics was a key constraint in the supply chain. Besides, order processing was severely disrupted owing to shop floor constraints in the manufacturing facilities. There were delays in FAT, factory acceptance tests. There were delays in QA/QC, quality assurance and quality control process delays. And also there were significant logistics bottlenecks, causing significant pain in procurement with customs quarantine norms that were new for all the products, some new sanitization certifications before inspection requirements, rules of origin requirements, transportation and customs documentation delays, availability of equipment and containers for stuffing, availability of manpower for shipping containers, absence of stevedoring staff over health risks, the mother vessels and feeder vessels schedule alterations, hub port connectivity, loading port, discharge port, electronic data interchange issues, filing cargo manifests, to name a few. So what were the intervention relief measures? Some of the intervention relief measures that came out of the research were that some of the owners and the contract, those who are executing the contract, the stakeholders, they were ready to relax the agreed delivery time by clients. So this was a significant goodwill, and it displayed on the culture of the business that you're in. Also, there was some relaxing on financial terms and conditions, such as customs fees, etc. And still, there's the most important stakeholders we cannot miss, the EPC contractors, which we will look into the challenges together next. Among the EPC contractors, the engineering, procurement, and construction contractors, what you see here in the slide, you could see a mixture of legends that are red and yellow. This was the data that we collected from a survey that was conducted by Mead Projects and Global Data. EPC contractors were the most impacted after all. A quick view of the shown survey by Mead, 15 out of the top 20 EPC contractors were experiencing significant negative impact. Those are the ones you see on the red legend. Workforce health, workforce mobility, subcontractors issues, uncertainty in contracts, site health infrastructure, international travel insurance and mobility concerns, sharp drop in oil and gas projects, greenfield projects moving to construction, and projects that remain active. There were only 17% construction delays during the first few months of the COVID-19. What was the relief measures as intervention? Again, there was a relaxation of agreed on-stream timeline by client organizations, and there was a large extent relaxing of some terms and conditions in the contracts, which came in as a gesture of goodwill from the project sponsor to hold the contract. In summary, takeaways from the industry's domain evaluation, EPCs were the most impacted by this crisis. And next, we'll move to the third domain, the portfolio.
If you allow me, Karan, Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon. Yeah, I may add in this subdomain, we are still in the second domain in the industry, and the audience will notice that the EPC contractor have the most negative implication of the crisis. Yes. One reason is because those other engineering and original manufacturer impact were compounded. So the EPC would include all of the delays in engineering and detail engineering, and as well as in material delivery. So they appear to be the most suffering from this pandemic.
Yes. Thanks, Fala, for your contribution. Okay, now we move on to the next slide. So we're looking at the portfolio here. At the portfolio level, setting priorities and the duality challenge of strategy and risk was a big dilemma. As most of us should be aware, in any capital portfolio, it is the duality of strategy and risk that poses the biggest dilemma in executing a capital portfolio. Where are you going to put your money, and what are you going to get out of it? And how soon can you get your returns? How do you justify your stakeholders with the portfolio decisions with your financial imperatives? The challenges of cash flow optimization. What is the optimum cash flow decision that will trade off strategy and risk at the portfolio level? Apparently, the impact, as you could see some salient figures on the slide, there were 52% capex cuts, according to a study by Mead Projects, and there was a 20% of the projects were dropped from the portfolio. And these statistics emerged from the GCC market survey that was conducted by Mead Projects for oil and gas and refinery petrochemical projects.
So, Karan, if I elaborate more, this is not a particular, the 52% capex cut is not related to a specific company rather than the region, entire region.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, Abdul. So there were cash flows leveling for the short term and the mid-term outlook, investment staggering. The focus was more or less on the greenfield and or less on the greenfield and more on the brownfield project. There was a focus on schedule rebaselining for projects under construction.
So, Karan, if you just maybe the takeaway from this portfolio domain.
Yeah.
Because of this challenge, we would see or the pattern that all project organizations are experiencing. And when we say portfolio, we're talking about a long-term project plan.
Yes.
There will be more of brownfield, and this means the revamp, the upgrade of existing assets, in lieu of having major greenfield new facilities.
Yeah. Yes. All right. Thank you, Fala, for that contribution. We'll move on to this next slide, where we're looking at the resilience of the project management organization. Quite obviously, the oil and gas project organization are optimizing their allocation of resources through mobilization and deployment across the team. PMO staffing is the real Achilles heel, as it is never too much and never too low that brings the challenge of optimum allocation of resources. What resources to be deployed where? How to organize cross-mobilization, optimize workload planning, matching deliverables with varying productivity. The impact was there was a sudden change of workload due to productivity loss at the first few months, and later stop of mega projects at the engineering stage. This was an interesting dilemma. So what are the intervention relief measures? There was an update of work processes, manpower allocation, and activation of digitalization and mobility tools. Last but not the least, we will review the impact on people and the project teams in the
Allow
following.
me, Karan, before you leave the slide, it's very important to note that all those project organizations, and we're talking about either the client, the engineering firms, even EPC contractors. So the resilience of the organization were tested during this crisis.
Absolutely.
The one who has this capability to shift between permanent and temporary organizations were less impacted than the rigid permanent organization type. So it was absorbed when there are capability or a possibility to shift resources between different organizations.
Okay. Thanks, Tola. Thank you. Thank you for that contribution. So we will move on to the next slide, where we're going to look at the preparedness of the project management teams. What is the impact? So we had a temporary increase of workload, and we found adapting of new work processes. Adapt to uneven workload distribution was an impact. Adapting to new work processes with virtual project management was an impact. Relocation among engineering offices was another significant impact. So what are the intervention relief measures? Learning of new skills to execute projects through virtual technologies was one of the most significant observations that we made when it came to intervention and relief measures. So with this, we are throwing light on the research that we have conducted and the research findings, and this is the upshot of our research. We hope that our research and recommendation will help the project management community to reaffirm our assessment, make the project management community respond resiliently to the pandemic, and customize project management practice for the new normal. That will be covered in our second part of the presentation.
Yeah, if you allow me, Karan, since we are talking to the PMI Case A chapter member, it's very crucial to stress that when we talk about the owner team, we're talking about people. So all of us who are involved in projects, this pandemic has demonstrated to us that we need to adapt to new skills. So when we talk about the digitalization, when we talk about the organization resilience, learning new ways to even do projects with agility, with efficiency. So now it happened that even PMI is renewing their PM book to cover those topics. Okay. So it's a coincidence that the project practitioners have an opportunity to adapt to those new skills and to be more prepared for the future, which we think we will have an upturn for growth of projects.
Absolutely.
I second you, Falah, and also as long as we are talking about the owner team here, I think this pandemic gave us a good real test to our owner team's flexibility in terms of executing engineering deliverables in-house due to the interruption in workload, and that will give the owner teams some space to better utilize their workforce. Right. Back to you, Karan.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Thanks, Abdul, and thanks, Falah, for those contributions. So we will now move on to the second part of our webinar, which will be the recommendation section. So with this compressed look into reactions of various project management organizations to COVID-19 and major execution challenges they faced, the part 2 of this webinar is going to focus more on, in the upcoming slides, on the outlook of what might be gained and learned now for lasting enhancements and changes for the future project industry's delivery system post-COVID-19 pandemic. So let us move on and explore the recommendations. This recommendation slide focuses on engineering contractors with specific reference to engineering value centers and some of the potential recommendation that we propose based on research findings are that the project organization can facilitate exchange of SMEs among engineering value centers depending on the project workload, especially the top performance. Fala, would you like to add something here, please?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one of the findings, especially when we said engineering value center, for example, the in-kingdom design offices, because of the shift and the nature of the projects, we talked about more brownfield, less greenfield. So there will be some of those offices may have a drop in their workload, while others will have an increase. So the client organizations, the owner project organizations would need to create that channel to transfer resources between these different centers, especially as I emphasized and Karan mentioned, the top performer engineers.
Fine, thank you, Fala. And the other recommendation that we're finding here is that to formalize in future engineering contract work from home gradually for low complex, less sensitive activities and to reduce the office cost burden.
Karan, if you allow me here, I think you have said it very well. It's for low complex, less sensitive activities that were possible, to work from home. And as you can see in the previous slides, we were talking about 80% during feed phase that, the organizations can execute remotely their duties. However, for detailed designs, it's 68. And maybe we raise a question here, why we have less percentage capability to execute detailed design remotely, whereas 80% in the feed, and that's due to the nature of the detailed design where they need to interact in the side with the contractor and executing, construction activities. That's impossible to be managed from remote environment. Back to you, Karan.
Well, thanks, Abdul. That was very good insight from you. And lastly, in this slide, we find that it is very important to identify opportunities at portfolio level for standard repeated projects design. I think, Fala, you had a couple of examples on this, right?
Yes. Just to put more clarity on this recommendation, we usually utilize the engineering centers for projects by projects. Now, since we have let's say a slowdown on the project activity, there are long-term, again, we still have a portfolio that we want to execute on the long term. And this last recommendation, I could summarize it saying one design for many build.
Yeah, so design one and build many.
Yes, design one, build many. And I will give you example. We have, for example, fire stations. We have electrical substations. We have building interface buildings. So all of these repeated fixed design, even though we know that there are multiple projects in the future, the engineering offices could be utilized to make those designs on the midterm in preparation for the future projects. So that will be like a more efficient way, as well as they will reassign their resources to a more value-adding activities during this downturn of project activity.
Okay. Thanks, Fala. And the other observation which I'd like to make here is that I think what cuts across through all these recommendations, there is one common characteristic, which I think is communication. I think communication is very critical between project sponsors and contractors and designers. Do you agree with me?
Yes.
Absolutely. Fine. So we'll move on to the next slide from engineering value centers to the next recommendation slide. In this recommendation slide, we focus on OEMs, the original equipment manufacturers, and some of the potential recommendations that we propose based on research findings are build on more collaborative long-term sourcing agreements for high-demand assets and services, emphasize sourcing critical and high-demand equipment for local approved suppliers, and gain advantages and access to regional manufacturing hubs rather than hubs positioned in far-off geographical locations to leverage distance economies and to reduce uncertainties. Is there anything you'd like to add, Fala?
Yes. Yeah. What we, one thing that this crisis also tests those, let's say, relationship between a client and a material supplier that are transactional, did not withstand the test of the crisis. So it's reaffirmed the need for a long-term strategic agreements, especially on those commodity and services that are high demand and are critical. So it wasn't a new lesson, but the pandemic has reinforced its significance.
All right. Thanks. Thank you, Fala. Thank you for that contribution. Okay. Now, next, we'll move on to a more critical recommendation of the industry stakeholders, which are the EPCs, the engineering, procurement, and construction contracting companies. And this recommendation side is focusing with some of the potential recommendations that we propose based on research findings are. First and foremost, we feel that we have to clarify force majeure applicability to different crises. Force majeure is not fully applicable for COVID-19 since the situation is not elevated to the condition of nothing can be executed. As a result, the contract terms and conditions shall be more clearer to define the roles and responsibilities of different parties of the pandemic. Perhaps, Fala, could you enhance the contribution on the slide, please?
Yeah, it's very important, and it's maybe part of this engagement with the PMI KSA member. There are debates, there are different interpretations of the force majeure in our contracts. And I'll just quote IPA, which is the Independent Project Analysis, one of the consulting firms, whom are also researching this topic, and they are seeing a number of instances in which contractors are seeking to invoke force majeure due to the pandemic, when in fact the projects that they were justifying for the force majeure were in trouble even before the pandemic in terms of cost and schedule. So it shouldn't be a window for low performers. Now the recommendations is to now, after this experience, it's worth having a unified, clearer definitions of force majeure and when it can be applicable. Now the easiest, let's say, determination of what can be called a force majeure when any of the parties absolutely cannot perform. And we could see, and it's very difficult to apply the COVID-19 as a root cause for this event.
And this is applied to all contracts, being construction, ABC, supply chain. As highlighted by Falah, I think clarity is required. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Abdul. Thank you, Falah. The other piece of recommendation you find here in the EPC segment is that we feel that building on more collaborative long-term contracting agreements for brownfield projects that tend to maintain a future certain workload for the contractors. So creating collaborative LTAs, long-term agreements for brownfield site-based projects is another recommendation that we're coming out with from the research.
If you allow me, Karan.
Yes, please.
Just maybe an additional point to this recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
The brownfield compared to the giga size greenfield, they are more of a constant workload. So when you look at a 10 years portfolio, you would always expect to have a constant number of projects to revamp, upgrade, turnarounds, T&Is, and these are constant. So that these are like leverage we could use to build long-term agreements with the main EPC contractors.
Okay.
And even it will help them even to be potential for greenfield who are on and off. So it's just to benefit from having this a long-term relationship, which we said the pandemic has tested when they are transactional. They're not very useful to help the two parties to face together the consequences of a crisis like what we are living today.
Okay.
If I may add, Karan and Falah, and this is also applicable for surface, not only construction and services as well. Having and building many LTAs are really advisable.
Okay. Thank you, Abdul. Thanks, Abdul, and thanks, Falah, for the contribution on the slide. With this, we move on to the next section of our recommendation, which is the portfolio. This recommendation slide focuses on capital portfolios and some of the potential recommendations that we propose based on our research findings. The first and foremost, such as it is recommended if projects are competitive to at least make projects ready at the starting line to move quickly and smoothly to execution. You have to improve work process efficiency, such as up to 35% as per IPA recommendation in the FEL duration or the front-end loading duration. And added to this is attributes such as agility, resilience, and as well as cost and schedule-driven projects with timely decision-making. Falah, you got something on these numbers from IPA?
Yes. What we're saying, say the next few years, we could see that there are, when projects, as we said, the number of projects dropped and the capex cut, we would see a turn down. Now, the question to project organizations is how do we keep our resources adding value during this time or this, let's say, few years or 2 to 3 years and make them productive. So one of the recommendations that IPA has cited is the efficiency on the front-end loading process. And they think there is up to 35% possibility to make it more agile and efficient. So the project practitioners can add value by looking at those processes, which we were not able to, let's say, when the projects were ongoing. It's very hard for all of us to have even the time and the focus on those process optimization.
Okay. Thanks, Falah. Just to compliment you, Falah, I think IPA is also recommending a process called BEAM. I think we should be aware of BEAM, which is Business Engineering Alignment Meetings. They strongly propose this, which complements the concept you just explained to us. That's what is IPA doing too at the moment. Okay, so moving on to the next section under this portfolio recommendation. Accelerate executing portfolio initiatives such as modularization, improving non-metallic application, and adapting to green energy technologies. So this is another recommendation which has come out of the research. And in the portfolio, managing a capital portfolio, we propose that there is a need to accelerate executing portfololio project initiatives. Moving on to the next slide. Yes, Falah?
Karan, on this slide, as we maybe to take away, what we are seeing the future, as we mentioned about the more brownfield projects and less greenfield.
Yes.
We would see that the project team and people like us, and like the member of the KSA PMI chapter, will be more involved at the portfolio level initiatives. Okay. And you cited some. So when we talk about modularization, it's an effort. How would we shift some of the site working hours to more near site construction for safety and productivity reasons? You also talked about non-metallic applications, which, you know, it's one of the strategy to increase the local content, as well as the energy technology. So we would now shift it into, again, to a portfolio level, less project level, more into brownfield and less greenfield.
Thanks. Thanks, Fala, for that observation. Okay. Now, with that piece of useful observation, we're going to move on to the next recommendation slide, which is focused on the project management organization. This recommendation slide focuses on a holistic view of the project management organization, and some of the potential recommendations that we propose based on our research findings are: optimize resource allocation to site-based projects, and accelerate executing project digitalization. Enabling exchange of projects' human resources between central project management and site-based operation-led projects. Could you point something on this, Fala?
Yeah. When we just, maybe a definition, when we mentioned site-based projects, we meant those operation type, the one that are usually led by our operation organizations. So they are the brownfield type projects. Now, again, because of this shift between greenfield to brownfield, usually large projects will be done by central project management. The site-based, the smaller type projects will be done by different operation organizations. And this recommendation is to create that two-way road between the two organizations to allocate resources as the workload dictates and both. So we would think that there will be a more of a migration of project management resources from you know, central PMT to site-based project you know, proponent-led organizations.
Okay. Thanks, Fala, for that compliment. The other segment of this recommendation is that we feel that the need to accelerate executing projects through digital technologies and digital transformation, that is virtual teams, four-dimensional design, digital twins, e-inspection, virtual bidding, and electronic documentation, all to improve productivity, would have a very significant impact as a response. And this is another segment of the recommendation under project management organization.
Yeah, I agree with you, Karan. During our engagement, you know, during the preparation of this survey and research, we have engaged with so many entities, and it was obvious that, you know, utilizing the digitalizations, especially for execution phase, utilizing the inspections, conducting hold point inspection virtually, that all add, you know, some enhancement on the work productivity, and you know, marginally align the slippage in the schedule during execution phase. So yes, many companies, they have already started the digitalization. Our recommendation here just to encourage you know, the globe to go and really accelerate these initiatives and complete virtual processes as soon as possible, because it's proven satisfactory. Back to you, Karan.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Abdul, for that contribution. Okay, with that nice piece of contribution from Abdul, we're moving on to the next slide in our recommendations. This recommendation slide focuses on the project teams, and some of the potential recommendations that we propose based on research findings are: balance front-end load workload distribution between project owners and contractor teams, increase teams' responsibilities on utilizing virtual digital technologies such as reporting, periodic communication, increasing teams' capabilities on utilization of digital technologies, promote unified reporting and progress measurement systems with EPC contractors, enhance controls and QA/QC processes through remote technologies and electronic documentation, and retain the right size of skilled and experienced manpower to be prepared for the future project's upturn. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this, Fala?
I think, as you know, when it comes to the last, it's the most, last and not least is the project team, as we mentioned before.
Yes.
Again, one risk is to lose qualified project expertise because we have this tremendous pressure.
Yeah.
And when we need them in the future, they will not be there. So the takeaway is to retain those high-performing, skilled, and experienced project management engineers and practitioners. And they can be adding value. As we mentioned, there are more work that was not attended because we were busy after different projects, as I mentioned, at the portfolio level. So, and again, the project team has to be also using this opportunity to even scale up their expertise in the, as we mentioned, digitalization and organization resilience, on efficiency, and so forth.
Fine. Thank you, Fala. Thank you for that nice piece of contribution. With this, I think we are concluding with our set of recommendations that we come out, and the research findings, and whatever has been the upshot from this research, and the recommendations that were extended through this. So we'd like to thank all of you. Thank PMI KSA chapter. Thanks for the time from the audience. And we'll also request that you could communicate to us on the email IDs that are provided here. And we are open to a question and answer session. And it's for you to, Faisal, to take over now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Karan. Thank you very much, Mr. Falah and Mr. Abdul Qadir, for this interesting and informative session. If you allow me now, we would like to take some questions from the audience. I think we have several questions. One question is asked from Lewis. Lewis is asking, can you clarify where these impacts are taken from, KSA, Middle East, or global?
Yeah, Karan, can you answer this question?
Oh, yes. This is mostly the research findings are very specific to Middle East. The research data was mostly limited to the Middle East projects, the Middle East project management environment.
And
Good.
to add to Karan, the IPA was more global.
Yes.
So there are also additional global aspect to the findings.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you, guys. We have another question from Mustafa. I think the question is asking, if I understand this correctly, says, how is it important to apply agile management to construction while having a clear scope and deliverable?
Abdul, can you take that question?
Because usually when we talk about, at least from my understanding, and correct me, please, you're the expert here. Usually when we talk about agile, we talk about like flexibility, we talk about sprints, we talk about, backlog. But when it comes to a construction project, it's there is not a lot of room that you can really be flexible on. So how can we apply the concept of being agile and flexible with these type of projects?
Yeah, I think Abdul Qadir may jump to maybe help, and then you can complement.
Yeah, agile.
It's a good question, very good question, Abu Abdullah Tismahli. And I think the assumption saying clear scope and deliverables for oil, gas, refining, and petrochemical is not always the case. So agile, again, there are so many unknowns as the projects evolve, and the agile concept still will be required in certain projects with certain nature.
Sure. It's good to know. I think that answered the question. Thank you. Mr. Falah. We have another question. What are the proposal for investment in renewable projects and renewable project to minimize GHG emissions while enhancing the ROI against fossil fuels at the same time? Well, that's really a very wide question.
I think we can record these questions and we can, if the time is not allowed, we can refer back to Sayyid Hassan, if I'm not mistaken. We can give him the firm answer, inshallah.
Okay. We have one question from Shabu. Is there a way to download the survey result for understanding the study in detail? He's asking about more information. Maybe he can contact you guys to get more information about the survey and the numbers that you guys shared during the presentation.
Yes, sure. We will share the email, Faisal, and we will be happy to even share information after the webinar, especially if it's more additional information.
Okay, I'm sure Shapo is listening. So thank you, team. Another question. Maybe we can take this question. Says, thank you for your valuable insights related to COVID-19 impact. The question, when company decided to optimize portfolio and defer projects, how was the reaction from EPC firms, and how did the company manage reservation of the contractors already under execution, that is already ongoing?
If I would, I think I may understand the question. The most of the cut were for projects that are still on the planning stage, and the EPC are not yet involved at that.
Yeah, there are no FIDs. There are no FIDs yet.
Okay. How was from a question from Babu? How was the impact of the delay claims by contractors with regards to force major conditions on capital projects on the developers? Was there an assessment of the same as part of the research? That is the question. I'm not sure if this question is clear for you, team.
I would prefer if Babu will resend his question. It wasn't very clear. We didn't want to jump to an answer when we're not sure of the question. I think I know the topic, but it would be nice if Babu will send us a very specific question after the webinar.
Yes, Bob, make sure you send your question. I think
Faisal, there is a question from Said Bukhari.
Said Bukhari, okay.
Yeah, highlighting that thanks for sharing an important topics. Almost all of the recommendations are cost and schedule performance enhancing steps any project can adopt. It is interesting to notice these are not COVID-19 specific though. My answer, no, these are very much related to COVID-19 impact as a pandemic. And the recommendation were derived from a survey, Q&A, face-to-face meetings with all entities, as highlighted before, the project management, the suppliers, the contractors, and the project teams. So I say no, it's very much related to COVID-19 specific. So the second part of the question, so is it safe to say that during these kind of challenging times, enhancing of project performance become a need to avoid project to derail from targeted performance? Yes, absolutely. They have to go and really try to intervene these challenging issues and try to at least, if not enhance the performances, to sustain the same performance and avoid dropping down. Okay, that's our answer to Sayyid Bukhari.
Thank you, Mr. Abdul Qadir. There is a question from Sayyid. Maybe you can take 2 more questions, just for the sake of the time. Excellent presentation, capital project resilience shown by Middle East. How would you balance out HSSE and execution risk for the inherent brownfield jobs to be executed under new LTAs, clubbed with optimum life cycle cost for all stakeholders?
Yeah, I think it's an excellent question from Sayyid. Very relevant, and it's true. The challenge now, because of those brownfield, they are always in live plant, so there are more challenges that the project team has to deal with, and all organizations, from the owner, from the engineering firms, as well as from the EPC. So I agree with Sayyid, and this is part of the skill and let's say the focus of the future project teams working on those facilities. Health, safety, security, and environment are of paramount importance, and they need to be again, they need to be in the priority. And how handling brownfield projects are, even they might be smaller, but they are more demanding when it comes to those 4 criteria.
Thank you. This is 2 last question, or 1 more question. Can you please advise landscape of digital transformation technologies and the capital project management? Which companies are at the vanguard of the digital transformation? I'm not sure if this is really relevant to...
We can answer that question later on through emails, no problem, because it's going to take time.
Okay. Please, guys, these are very excellent. The guest, as you can tell, like these questions, but it's going to take more time to answer it. So make sure you email them. Their contacts visible. You can see them now on the screen. Make sure you take a screenshot or write down the contact information so you can send your questions later on. Thank you. Somebody was texting me, if you allow me, I said, please ask the speakers. I said, okay, I'll ask them. They said, when he talk about recommendation portfolio, the processes efficiency part, they suggested 2 things. One thing is Agile, and the second thing is resilience. What do they mean by resilience when it comes to process efficiency?
Yeah, when we met resilience, and we talked about the organization, because as we mentioned, we looked at different domains. So the more resilient, how we are organizing our team and our projects, the more prepared we are for those similar crises in the future. So as I said, the permanent, having the hybrid organizations type helps you to be more resilient, and you will be able to have your pool of resources are closer and available to you when you need them. And when there are changes on the dynamic of the business, you will always be able to adapt instead of having a permanent, rigid organizations and processes. So that's what we meant by resilience.
And Khoy Faisal, as highlighted during the presentations, the project organizations during the pandemic, they managed to really minimize the impact on the schedule slippage by dividing their teams into sub-teams to cope with the international cooperation and work in different time zones geographically. So instead of having a 7 to 4 hours, working hours, they split it into 3 or 4 sub teams, different time zone, in order not to hawk the projects, minimize the slippage of the schedule, by really cooperating internationally with the vendors and suppliers and manufacturers. That's part of the agility of the projects and what's been recommended in this survey.
Okay. The adaptability element, I'm sure, can be very challenging, but at the same time, everybody, I'm sure, can tell the crucial role of being able to adapt to different circumstances quickly. I think our time is up. Thank you, Mr. Abdul Qadir, Mr. Karan, and Mr. Faleh. Is there, before we wrap up, is there anything else you would like to add?
I'd like, if allow me, I'd like to appreciate everybody present in this webinar, and special thanks to PMI TSA chapters, as well as our colleagues whom really support us in this survey, being in kingdom, out of kingdom, suppliers, manufacturer, project management, design offices, EPCs. We really appreciate their feedbacks. They were patient with us. We had a very long discussions with them in details. And this is the fruit of the survey. And I really appreciate everybody's support.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Abdul Qadir. Thank you, Mr. Karan. Thank you, Mr. Falah, for this very informative session. And thank you for your time, actually, and for accepting our invite. We're very honored and happy that you were able to take some time off and share this great amount of information. With this, we will conclude our session today. And thank you, everybody, for your time and for your attendance. And we will, inshallah, see you next time. Make sure the last chance, if you haven't got the contact information, take a screenshot or take a picture of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.